Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage in the sunny, warm state of Maine once again. We're having a heck of a stretch of weather. I love it. It's supposed to be at near 90 this weekend. Not a big fan of that. You know, it was 30 the other day. It was 30 this morning. Now we're headed for 90. Anyway, it's nighttime after dinner. Got everything picked up and I've been trying to come out here a couple hours every evening. Otherwise, none of this stuff is going to get done. I fired up my lawnmower today and mowed my lawn, and I've been sneezing ever since. So whatever I kicked up, I was breathing a lot of dust and whatever. I don't usually have too many allergic responses, but today I'm having one, so if I sound funny, now you know why. If I have to suddenly pause and go sneeze, I'll do that. So I shot some stuff last night. I had gotten up early yesterday morning, and I'm going to concentrate on the 377 first, because that's going to be easier, at least get the short block together for that. And by that point, I believe my bearing spaces will be here tomorrow, so I'll be able to start working on the 421, but that is going to be more mock-up and fit-up, where this is measure and put together. The 377, that is. So yesterday morning early, I drilled the holes in the block and got out the plug that I couldn't get out. I got a little footage of that, and last night I was out here touching up the paint on the 377 block, which is, I've decided to use the 2-bolt block as originally intended, and I also painted the 4-bolt block. I stepped away from the hyper-eutectic piston and forged piston situation and just started measuring the bore itself, and there's like 4 or 5 10,000 difference between the bores, so pretty much I could pick either one. And I'm going back to the original plan. So the 377 is going in the 2-bolt block as intended. So I'm going to show you that, and I'll be right back. So I got up early this morning, came out to the old hot rod shop, and decided I was going to drill these 2 holes and remove that plug. Things are going pretty well until they weren't. The rear hole is a piece of cake. It goes all the way into the bell housing. You can see the light behind there. But this one, I struck water. See the light down the hole? That's a problem. So what do you do then? Well, if you go up 1 drill size, that makes it 1/4 pipe. And now I have another water drain that's too high. I mean, I got one right there, so the block isn't scrap, but this position is not half 13 like it should be. I've never had anything that had the clutch pivot this far forward. I was just putting it there because the boss is there. I measured and did the same depth as the 4-bolt block next to me. This is the 2-bolt block. And I struck water, so no big deal. I knew there was a chance of it, and the plug I was able to heat up around here. I burned my paint. You can see I've touched it back in there, but the plug did come out. And I put a new plug in there. You know, do a little better job cleaning up my Teflon. I like to make it nice and neat, so when the paint dries, I'll do that. And we'll continue on. I need to touch up the paint on this block. I have the matching color, so I just got to do a little work around here. Get it ready to assemble. But I guess in the big scheme of things, I'm glad that I actually broke through, because I would hate to have that just a real thin wall and have it let go, you know, down the road sometime, leave you walking. So if I was indeed that close, which I was, I'm glad it went ahead and poked through and I'm able to plug it. I'll probably put a plug like that so it's flush, not hanging out. Put this one down here. I spent 20 minutes to a half an hour carefully masking and taping off and touching up the new cast color on the 2-bolt block. And it looks fine. I like the looks of the freeze plugs installed afterwards. It seems more detailed, even though the factory would have painted over everything. Whatever, this one's pretty much ready for final cleaning. The 4-bolt block, I did something a little bit different. If you're familiar with other mechanical channels on YouTube, you probably have heard of Uncle Tony's Garage. right after Christmas, he hand painted with a paintbrush a big block Mopar, and within a couple days he had over 1 million views. And he, like other gearheads, have done it that way forever. I have. That can's almost empty. I don't know how many blocks I painted with it. A cheap 1.5-inch throwaway brush. And about, well, if I said 15 minutes, it'd be a lot of your time. Way faster than having to tape it off. You're done. It's nice and thick. The nooks and crannies of the cast iron just grab that paint. It's super thick, way thicker than you can get with spray. No runs, no overspray. If you happen to get any on the gasket surfaces, you can just put a little brake clean on a paper towel and wipe it right up. So fast, so easy. And we're back. The 377 block is clean as it's going to get in my fabrication shop, and it's going together. You can go crazy, you know, have it NASA clean, but there's limits to everything. You know, somewhere tonight, somebody is underneath their stock car with a cordless impact, gunning a set of bearings in the speedy dry in the dirt. So that is the extremes, and we're going to discuss some of that. Got to sneeze, hang on. There's no question you can go to extremes on how much effort you want to put into it, measuring the clearances for engine assembly. You cannot do anything and trust that, you know, the crank is standard and the bearings are marked standard, or you can trust your machine shop, or you can have some simple measuring tools, all the way to having $8,000 and $10,000 dial bore gauges and mics. I don't have any fancy stuff at all. But I must confess, before we go any further, I used to assemble a lot of small block Chevys for potato chip trucks. My brother-in-law worked on them. I'd go over there at night, he'd have all the parts lined up, and we'd just fire them together. The parts were coming from a machine shop. We told the guy we wouldn't be checking a thing. He was pretty confident in his work, and we never had any problem. But there was minimal risk. I mean, the worst case scenario, if something went wrong, we'd have to, you know, put another engine in it and send that one back and have it remachined. That was more of a production line thing. You got to believe back in the day. Nowadays, with the technology they have, I'm sure they measure it all with lasers and everything else. But, you know, back in mid-50s when the small block Chevy came out, they probably, you know, their measuring devices may or may not have been any better than what I have right here. So tonight, for myself, I don't assemble that many engines. It's not a $100,000 engine. This is a $218 crankshaft at Speedway right now with a $30 set of main bearings. So my risk is minimal, but I still want to do it right because there's a lot of other effort involved. So I have a micrometer. I have 2 or 3 2 to 3 inch mics. That's kind of funny. I think I have 3 2 to 3 inch mics. This is the nicest one I have. It's a Brown and Sharp. It's nice that it comes with a standard, a 2-inch standard, so you could actually check that it's still reading correctly. However, for checking bearing clearances, this is nothing more than a placeholder. The numbers don't mean anything. You measure the journal. In this case, I'm doing the rod journals first. And I go ahead and check all 4. They all measure the same. They all have the same drag on them. And with this, much like I was telling you about the piston skirt clearance, I'm zeroing. In this case, I have a sled type dial bore gauge because my regular dial bore gauge won't go small enough to go in the rod. So this does, and this reads in half thousandths, which is really nice. So I zero, I put this in a vise, clamped with a rag, nothing fancy. Zero the dial bore gauge. I have taken a connecting rod and a set of rod bearings, and using the rod vise, which is in that giant vise behind me, I've torqued it up. And if you're careful with the dial bore gauge, you won't even scratch the bearing. And I'm showing just a hair over, technical term, a hair, 2 thousandths, and that's perfect. So I know all my journals are the same. The rods were checked even though they're brand new. The small end wasn't large enough for the pins I had for the pistons, so he enlarged them, and I know he measured the big end in all of them. So it's up to me now whether I want to do all 8 or I'm going to go with 1. I'm not sure yet, to be honest with you. Right now, I'm just pausing to shoot the video, but these are choices you're going to make. You know, a relatively stock rebuild. I know all the journals are the same size. The bearings probably are all the same size. And the way I'm telling you is one way to do it. You could just dry assemble it and check it with plastic gauge. That is definitely better than doing nothing. I've seen a lot of videos of guys who work in machine shops that after they're all done with these methods, they'll go ahead and occasionally check themselves with plastic gauge just to see how it's working. My eyes are itching now, sorry. And you can actually measure the, like for instance, the main bearing bore in the block. They make a special mic, or you can try to use your regular one to measure the thickness of the shell of the bearing plus the opening of the rod. But I find the more you measure and have to do math, the more chance for error. Tolerance stack, I believe, is the word I saw in the video. So in this case, I'm pretty direct. I've measured the journal, I've zeroed the dial bore gauge, I've gone right to the bearing, slightly over 2 thousandths. That's perfect. Same procedure on the main bearings. I was showing a loose 2.5 thousandths just for kicks. I grabbed the old plastic gauge. This is green, which is 1 to 3 thousandths. And if you've never used plastic gauge, you completely dry, set the crank in on the bearings or the rod, depending on what you're doing. In this case, I was doing the crankshaft. And you cut. Inside this is a small piece of plastic, round, looks like a straight piece of rope, you know, plastic rod, whatever you want to call it. You lay it on the bearing, carefully put it down and torque it down, and then remove it, and the little colored stripes are gauges, and you just line it up and measure. It will definitely let you know you're close. So this is definitely better than nothing. But any combination of things we've talked about tonight, at least you have the peace of mind that it's probably going to be just fine. So fortunately, there's a range. And like all things, you know, you don't want to be, if it's 1 to 3, 1's acceptable, but would be pretty tight. And on the mains, like I mentioned in the other video, the main bearings feed the rods. And jumping back, when the crankshaft was here, I measured all 5 main journals. The main journal, number 5 main journal is typically cut slightly smaller, so there's a little more clearance because that's where the oil pump is. And you don't want a restriction coming right off the pump, but you don't want it too loose either, or the oil would never get delivered. So it's acceptable for that journal to be slightly smaller, but in this case, they all measured the same. So anyway, I can now wash off the plastic gauge. Brake clean should take care of that. And tomorrow, if it's too late tonight, and I don't feel like doing it, but tomorrow, if I have time, I will at least put the crankshaft in. One more note on that, the rear main seal. Over the years, there's been techniques. This is a 2-piece seal block, both of them. People have staggered the seals. I've done it myself. I've suspended that operation, just 2 dabs of sealer. When you put the halves together, it's fine. So, another thing we didn't cover as far as measuring bearings, you always go 90 degrees from the potting line. This is machined wider here. So your shortest distance is going to be up and down, and that's where you measure. That's why the plastic gauge is there. This is designed 2 reasons under normal operation. It's a little looser on the side, so oil can puddle, if you will. And under stress, in theory, when everything stretches, this will actually get round. If it started round, it would get too tight on the sides. It would pull it up. So that's the theory behind that. I'm all big on theory and reading theories, and these theories probably come into play at the extremes, not just motoring down the road, but you know, when you get into the throttle, or put excess load on it or make 1,000 horsepower. Well, eventually you're going to find the limit of anything. So I'm babbling. The night's over. I'll talk to you in a couple days. Thanks for watching.